He does look like a cross between Tommy Wiseau and like a Michael Jackson impersonator. He's got a weird
I
thing
thought
going
he looked
on.
like a sort of Tommy Wiseau crossed with Kit Harington, personally.
I think that's doing him a bit. That's giving him too much credit because Kit Harington's, he's a good-looking guy. Hi, Jacob here. Thanks for listening to my podcast, Underrated, Overhated. You might be listening on Spotify, YouTube, Castbox, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Just so you know, you can also find me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. I also have a Reddit account, and on all of these platforms, I'm simply under the name Big Yellow Praxis. If you do take the time to find me on any of these, like or follow me, I'd really appreciate that. And it would also mean that you can keep up to date more easily with episodes. Thanks. Anyway, so this is another episode about terrible music. Welcome to the podcast, I should have said first. This is a podcast called Underrated, Overhated, about underrated and overhated music. This series within the podcast is slightly different in that we're talking about terrible music. And this music is in no way underrated. And it's been a bit of a trek, a little bit of an adventure through
Yes,
an endless vista of shit, basically, so far.
it certainly
We've
does
covered
seem
quite a
endless.
lot. It does seem endless, yeah. We've covered quite a bit already, actually. It's been quite diverse. But today, I genuinely think today, I was incredibly impressed with how bad the music was in the last episode. But today, this was uniquely terrible stuff. And I really enjoyed listening to it.
Yeah, some of this is my favourite across the whole series, I think.
Oh, yes. I mean, me too, I think. So this is a little bit different. I think the theme around this episode is people who are famous in another sphere of life, then trying their hand at music a bit. So we have a famous footballer, a famous ex-child actor, and I say famous, the news presenter from the 70s in the United Kingdom. Not really what I would call famous these days, but I assume was famous in the 70s.
I think at the time he was quite famous, yeah.
I'm not sure what order we should do them in because there's this kind of it's impossible to rank them from best to worst or
They're
from.
all bad in their own way. But in terms of my favourite, I think we should leave that one till the end, personally, which
Okay,
is
so I'm gonna let
the
you.
newsreader one.
Okay, yeah. So I'll let you. Do you want to do the order that was the same as the order of the playlist?
Yeah, it's probably simplest.
Right. Okay. So do you want to give the name and the artist for this one?
So the first one is Corey Feldman and the Angels. Go For It is the song. It's not a very good song.
Corey Feldman was a genuinely very good actor, as a child and into his kind of teenage years. He was in The Goonies, he was in The Burbs. What else was he in? He was in so much in the 80s. He was in loads and loads of films. And he was genuinely good. I remember being a kid and liking the films that he was in. And he was in Stand By Me, which is...
Yeah.
So he was kind of like late 80s, early 90s films a lot of the time. He was in Stand By Me, which he was brilliant in as well. And Stand By Me is an excellent film. So he's a
I
genuine...
don't think I've seen that. I need to, though.
Oh, I mean, you have to see... It's brilliant. I mean, it's genuinely brilliant film. I won't ruin it, but it's emotional as well. It's great. But it's a shame that his skill at acting never kind of translated into musical skill. I don't know how else to put it.
I think that's a fair description. I mean, so I don't know how much he actually did in terms of singing and songwriting, but hopefully not a lot if this song is anything to go off.
Well, so from what I know, I remember seeing this video kind of doing the rounds a few years ago when I think he was trying to kick off a musical career and didn't really get anywhere. I think maybe he did have an album or something. Maybe he had an EP, I don't know. But it didn't get very far.
He says he's got a few albums.
Well, there we go.
There's Corey Feldman's Truth Movement.
That's always a dubious name. That sounds more like a cult than a band.
Yeah, that's the thing. I'm just trying to...
I do have to say though, so look, this song is terrible. But it's not as bad as... It's not as bad when you listen to it by itself without looking at the video, because I did that earlier. I went for a walk.
Yeah.
and I just listened to it on YouTube, but kept my phone in my pocket, didn't look at the video, and it was
The
still
video is
crap.
quite an integral part of
Yes,
the
yeah,
overall experience.
yeah. The song is crap, but it's not so bad that it's really, it doesn't really make me cringe to the same extent as some of the other songs. But in conjunction with the video, that is the thing that really lifts it off into the stratosphere.
Oh, absolutely. Do you want to describe the video?
Yeah, go on, yeah.
So he's dressed all in black with a sort of hood over his head. And then the angels are fairly scantily clad women in
Yes.
white with sort of fluffy halos on above their heads, which is as cringy as it sounds, I think.
It is very
Yeah,
cringy. It feels like a very bad attempt at that kind of Hugh Hefner Playboy thing, which
it's
is already
quite
cringy.
tasteless. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
It's a tasteless attempt at something tasteless.
Yeah, exactly. It's really weird and it's actually quite uncomfortable watching it. But to me, it's all about his dance moves, isn't it, really? Like his attempt
Yeah.
at basically mimicking Michael Jackson is what he's trying to do. He was friends with Michael Jackson as a kid, which obviously raises tons of weird questions.
Mm.
But yeah, it was clearly an inappropriate relationship, as far as I can tell. But he claims that Michael Jackson never did anything weird or anything like that, and the question of what Michael Jackson did is always up in the air anyway. But
Yeah.
I don't know the history behind that, but I do know that Corey Feldman, child actors, and this is kind of a sad episode, I feel, overall. Despite the fact we'll try to
Mm.
keep it lighthearted because we're laughing at bad music, but
There's a sad
all
backstory.
of the people here, I feel like all of these songs have a bit of a sad backstory. And Corey Feldman, I'm not going to get tons into it. I don't necessarily know a lot about it, but there's a lot of exploitation of children in acting roles and films like that, and he has
Yeah.
had issues clearly through time. I've not followed it particularly closely, so I'm not going to sit here and kind of give some spiel about it because I don't know. But this was his attempt at, I guess, probably his millionth kind of career left turn, trying to do something a bit new, and it is just an absolute abject failure.
It's very cringy. And one thing I noticed on the video where he has another guy come in to do some singing as well. But if you if you watch towards the end,
Mm-hmm.
he doesn't know when the song finishes, so he does a sort of
Yes,
stage freeze thing, and then the song just carries on, which is that just cracked me up.
It's
I
really
mean, if your
weird.
co-singer doesn't know the song, then that's not a great sign.
It's really weird, and I think it's the kind of cringe that can only come of someone either with a lot of genuine confidence or like falsely projecting a lot of confidence whilst being completely incompetent. And I think this is
Mm,
why it is such a perfect example of what we always said we were looking for. We're always looking for the room of music. We're looking for the Tommy
yeah.
Wiseau of music. And I
And
think
on
this is
that
a
note, he
perfect.
actually looks quite similar to Tommy
He does.
Wiseau in the video.
That is a good point. He does look like a cross between Tommy Wiseau and like a Michael Jackson impersonator. He's got a weird
I
thing
thought
going
he looked
on.
like a sort of Tommy Wiseau crossed with Kit Harington, personally.
I think that's doing him a bit. That's giving him too much credit because Kit Harington's, he's a good-looking guy. I mean, so is Tommy Wiseau. Obviously, Tommy Wiseau is obviously the peak of
Oh, he's
masculinity.
beyond.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's almost insulting to even say it because it goes without saying. Um, but yeah, what was I going to say? Yeah, it's very because some of the previous songs we've done. So my two favorites from the last episode were the Mr. Blobby song and
Classic.
Brian Wilson's rap track. For anyone who is listening to this podcast and hasn't listened to the previous one, you definitely should because they are great tracks. But they seem to be aware of how ridiculous they are on some level.
Yeah, this is quite different. It seems
This
that there
is
is lacking in that self-awareness.
Yes, and I'm quite happy about that lack of self-awareness because it is really the
Yeah.
source of the entertainment, and it is for anyone who's watching this
Well,
on YouTube. For anyone who's watching this on YouTube, I'm going to put a little clip of the video, and that's going to really bring out the full appreciation of this. For anyone who's listened to this on Spotify, you're just going to hear bits of the track, which are terrible, but I really implore people to look it up on YouTube because you need to see the video. It's just hilariously bad. And I think was it a performance on it looks like daytime TV to me, I think.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what it's called, the Today Show. But what one thing that this lack of self-awareness, it's quite endearing, and it has echoes back to our previous episode when we were talking about Wesley Willis, and his stuff
Yes.
is, I love that. I have no qualms in saying that. It's terrible but brilliant at the same time. And
Yeah,
he
yeah.
didn't seem to have much self-awareness either, and that's quite an endearing part of the bad music. And I think
Yep.
this sort of
Yeah, yeah.
falls into that sort of category as well.
I do agree. Yeah, there is something endearing about all three of the songs today.
Yeah,
And I think what is endearing about it is that they are amateurs and they're just people. And maybe it does display a bit of arrogance as well. Well, I think it does, especially in this case. There's someone who's clearly good at something else, trying their hand at something they suck at, and maybe not realizing it. But it's still endearing because they almost wouldn't
you
know
get
any.
points for trying.
Yeah, and like they wouldn't know any better. It's a bit different to
Genesis from
spoil.
last episode.
Yeah, exactly. So Genesis should know better.
Mm.
Um, Brian Wilson probably should know better. It's a bit of a joke track, but it's still pretty bad. But
Yeah,
these guys,
it's on
you
the
kind of,
edge.
yeah. This is beautifully bad, but it has that endearing quality because they don't know any better. They don't know any better at all.
Mm.
But this song, it's almost a shame that the actual music doesn't match the video because the video is truly the thing that sets it apart. And this video definitely did do the
It gives it context.
yeah, it definitely did the rounds a while. I can't remember when it was. I feel like it was maybe 4 years ago, 5 years ago. And I think a lot of people, myself included, were just like, well, what happened to Corey Feldman? Because I didn't know. I knew he was in films in the 80s and 90s, and then he just disappeared, or maybe he didn't disappear, but he wasn't in films that I would have known.
Yeah.
And then he comes back and he does that. It's just the mind boggles.
Mm.
But it's definitely a worthy contender for one of the worst pieces of music. Well, maybe not one of the worst pieces of music, but one of the worst musical performances. It's definitely a contender for that, I think.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's just from its cringe factor,
Mm-hmm.
it excels to dizzying heights, not often
Yes,
seen
yeah.
necessarily on this series.
on
But
the subject of on the subject of the dizzying heights of cringe, I think it's time to move on to the next song.
yes, this one was an interesting find. It's by Paul Gascoigne of football fame, and it's called Geordie Boys.
So, I'm not super into football. I mean, I'm not into football at all. I shouldn't say I'm not super into it. It's not a thing that's part of my life. I don't follow it at all. I have no interest whatsoever in it. So,
Likewise, but
like, yeah,
he
we're
seemed to
very
be
we're very un-British in that regard, aren't we?
yeah, we're sort of outliers in that respect. But he was a big footballer in the 90s
Mm-hmm.
for Newcastle, hence the track title. And I'm not quite sure how this came about, but I think at the height of his fame, it was essentially just a cash in on
Yes. So I was going to say,
that.
all I really know is that he cried at the World Cup or something. Did he?
Something like that. I don't really follow football.
Well, my
So
older brother
can't.
is really into football. My older brother is really into football, and he, like, I think, yeah. So I think he cried either at the World Cup or Championship final or something like that, where England, I think, lost, and he was on the England team. They lost, and he starts crying, and I think it became a bit of a thing that people took the piss out of. And if someone, I think it was used as a general insult for anyone crying, like, "Oh, you Gaza," like, "Oh, you're just crying over nothing."
Okay. Yeah.
And like, if there's anyone listening, pretty much any other British person who knows anything about football, they'll be cringing at how little we know about Gaza specifically. But I do know that he achieved quite a bit of chart success because he was big, he was huge, and he was all over the place. I know that I know enough to know that he was incredibly famous, and he was like one of the main famous British footballers of that era. He did have some chart success. Covering, I think maybe with the original band Lindisfarne, the song "Fog on the Tyne."
Yeah. I think that was what kicked it all off, his musical career.
Right. Okay. So
I'm not quite
I knew
sure
he did that.
chronologically where this one slots in. Presumably after, maybe.
I feel like compared to Fog on the Tyne, this is probably his magnum opus. So I feel like he probably progressed from that into this. So the song is, what was it called? Geordie Boys
Geordie
by
Boys
Gaza.
by Gaza.
And it's I do have to say I don't know how you found this track because I googled it. It doesn't seem to be mentioned on Wikipedia.
It's not easy to find. Well, I mean, a magician can't reveal too many secrets. But I'm glad I found it. It's certainly worthy of inclusion, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Again, as with the previous one, it is best appreciated with the video.
Yes,
But
although
not
I think unlike the
necessarily.
unlike the previous one, it still keeps a lot of that genuine low quality cringe shit without the video. Just the
Yeah, the
audio
video is
itself
not
is enough.
required, but it
Yes,
adds
yeah.
the je ne sais quoi that's needed just to elevate it that bit
Yes, yeah, yeah,
further.
yeah, yeah, exactly. The video is brilliant. It's almost a disappointingly short song, though, isn't it? But what I find very troubling about the video is that at the very start it says 32, and I don't know whether that's saying it got to number 32 in the charts. I couldn't quite tell.
The video is a top of the pops video, so I think that is a safe assumption.
Yeah, so this podcast is usually about underrated music. There's a lot of music I cover that doesn't even chart, never mind getting to 32, which is so much better than this track. And it is genuinely, I think possibly the scariest thing about this track is that it managed to get to, presumably in the early 90s, to number 32 in the charts. It's not super high, obviously. It's not like maybe it did get higher, I don't know, but that's not like top 10. But 32's, I don't know, I'd be
It's
happy with
not
a
bad.
32 hit. You know what I mean?
Anything in
Yeah,
the top 40 is something to be proud of.
exactly.
I don't
But
know if
this
this is
song,
anything to be proud of, though.
oh no, certainly not. It seems to have a bit of everything. It has pitiful attempts at rapping, I guess.
Yep.
It's a very low grade attempt. It has a bit of like vocoder kind of voice box thing going on at points. Um,
Yes. Yeah, but again, quite early or primitive technology for
yes,
that
yeah,
sort of
yeah.
thing. It's not done particularly well.
I'm gonna be honest.
Um,
I don't think they have an excuse on that front because I think vocoder was probably quite well established by like the early 90s. So I don't think they have an excuse there. I don't think. Don't try to give them an out on that, Alex.
the budget wasn't super high. Most of the video looks like it was shot on a camcorder,
Yeah, yeah.
not a very expensive one at that. It's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
essentially a song about sort of just going out and getting drunk and just living in Newcastle, really.
Yeah, being a Geordie boy, and he really just leans on that a lot. And I think I'm not a Geordie myself, but I'm from Carlisle. It's close enough, and maybe Gaza gets to do it because he is genuinely a Geordie boy. But these negative stereotypes, they don't do us any good.
I'm just a poncy southerner, so I can't really comment.
Your words. You're sitting there going, that sounds about right. But yeah, this song is really quite unique. And again, I genuinely don't know how you managed to find it. It is one of those songs that I'm glad you found it, but also not particularly happy about having listened to
That's
it.
a theme that's sort of consistent across all these episodes, isn't it, really? You're
Yeah, it
glad
is.
I found it, but not thankful. So when you talk about the video plays an important part. So it's sort of it's as one of the comments on the video says, it wouldn't be out of place as an advert for a gay chat line. There's a lot of homoeroticism in there, which is
Oh yes. Doesn't Gaza like have his hairy chest out for the vast majority of the video? I feel like I
yeah, sort
remember.
of dancing with his shirt off. As
Yeah.
there's clearly some sort of green screen thing going on, and then
Yes.
it's
Yeah. Yeah.
interspersed with clips of them just sort of messing around in a taxi and out and about and that sort of thing. So
Yes. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
low production quality, but I don't know if he actually wrote the song. I honestly don't know what the credits
I
are.
have a feeling. I mean, genuinely, this isn't the kind of song that needs written per se. It just feels I assume some producer who just had a spare 5 minutes just threw together, like a rhythm track, the vaguest outlines of a chord progression or something, and just kind of went, we'll do this. And Gaza will occasionally just say things, and we'll keep repeating Geordie Boys, and then we'll make
Yeah,
a homoerotic video where Gaza can kind of have his hairy chest out a bit and have a green screen. I feel very much that it's low effort shit. Now that is the difference between this and, for example, the Mr. Blobby song, which is high effort shit. Do you know what I mean? You can see
it's an important dividing line, and you can see that in the video. I mean, the Mr. Blobby song did have some low quality moments.
Oh
Again,
yes, for sure. But
reference
you
to
could
the Tacoma Narrows Bridge disaster. Quite how that made it into the video, I don't know, but there was more production quality in
yes,
that.
yeah. I feel like the Mr. Blobby song was at times going out of its way to be bad, whereas this is just quite naturally bad.
Yeah, this is probably the most cringy one we've
I don't
done,
know.
or certainly one of them. I mean, the Shags were pretty cringy, for example.
Yeah, in terms of the pure music, I would agree. In terms of the video and the music, it's still one of the cringiest, but I think I genuinely felt more pain at the Corey Feldman song. I genuinely did. And maybe that's because I was already growing up, I was a fan of the films he was in, and I kind of expected better for some reason. Do you know what I mean? I think
Yeah,
once you
I think
see
that probably
someone,
makes a difference because I don't really have a horse in either of these races. I don't really know much about Corey Feldman or Gaza before this, so from I'd say I'm more objective in that sense, and for me, the Gaza song is definitely worse.
yes, I
But
see what
maybe a
you
lot of
mean.
that's part of the video. It's hard to say really because the video again does lend a lot to it.
It does, yeah. And I do appreciate your objective standpoint when it comes to this, because clearly I'm biased. But I was gonna say I nearly said that Corey Feldman had further to fall, but I guess not, because Gaza was very big. He's huge.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a quick glance over his Wikipedia page, and it looks like he had an absolute shocker of a time after his
Yes,
fall
yeah,
from grace in football. He'd been sectioned multiple times, struggled
yes, yeah,
through
yeah, and
addiction, bankruptcy. It's sort of it's a very tragic
it is, yeah,
um,
yeah.
situation. But again, this video came long before his retirement from
Right,
football.
yeah. I mean, it's what I said before. Like, this does feel like quite a tragic episode, and I don't want that.
Yeah,
Don't want people to be
we
too.
mustn't make light of the tragic human story behind it. We're focusing exclusively on the musical
Yes,
elements.
yeah, for sure. We don't. We're not mocking these people. If anything, we're valorizing them. We think they've done a great job at producing some grade A crap, and for that we are thankful. But we're still here to laugh at some songs.
Yeah. So yeah, it's an interesting one, and I'm surprised it was hard to find because given his fame, this should have
Yes, yeah,
been,
yeah.
and the fact that it clearly has charted at some point.
Yeah, I couldn't. Did you find any info about this at all online? I looked very briefly, but couldn't really find much.
Not a lot. I mean, it
Yeah.
was. I think it was a sort of a one-hit wonder sort of situation.
Yes, yeah. Which is a
Um,
shame. This does feel like it's the underrated song in the world of bad music, because the Corey Feldman thing was quite big. It was quite a meme. So is Mr. Blobby. Mr. Blobby often makes lists of some of the worst songs of all time, whereas it's kind of the
it's very much
underdog,
under the
isn't it?
radar. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And we're doing our job really well here by finding it and promoting it.
So in a sense, it's living up to the podcast name in that this is an underrated, terrible track.
Yes, I think so. Yeah. I think so. I think, yeah, we're doing a good job. Let's pat ourselves on the back here. Yep, well done, us. um, and I have to say, I think we should move on to the next final song, which seems to be one of your favorites. And I do think, again, this is
It's
actually
so funny.
it's a very underrated bad song, because I wasn't aware of this whatsoever until you sent it to me.
Yeah, so this one, as we've sort of previously alluded to earlier, this was a song that was recorded by, at the time, a very famous news presenter called Reginald Bosanquet. And he was on ITV. And again, it was before my time, but glancing through what I found on the internet, he had a reputation, whether it's deserved or not, I don't know, but
Mhm.
everyone sort of said he was an alcoholic. And this
Sorry,
song is,
there does seem to be a question mark around that point, doesn't there? Because I
yeah,
looked it up briefly, and he was epileptic for sure. And I think he had a bit of a stutter or something. And he was quite famously, from what I know, a bit ditzy or like not always very good at reading the teleprompter, which is part of the reason people thought he was often
yeah.
alcoholic because he slurred his words and things like that. So it seems like there's a
There's a
bit of a
question
question mark
mark.
around that.
Yeah,
Yes, yeah, yeah. So that's a little bit different to the other two songs this episode because the tragic story of this is a bit more of a question mark around it. We're not really sure. Um, but sorry, go on.
but yeah. So the song's called "Dance with Me."
Move, keep on going for a ride. We work all day, all week, all month.
I think the
All
best
year except 3 weeks.
way to describe it would be it's got that sleazy backing track that you'd expect in a low budget porno, while it's not a sung song. It's just speaks the words, and they're quite
Yes, yeah.
sleazy. I think it's probably the best way to put
Yeah,
it.
so the closest analogy I can think of is probably this is a very, very, very bad version of Ian Dury and the Blockheads. You
I've
know the
not heard
song
that.
Sex and Drugs and Rock and Roll?
I know of it. I haven't heard it.
Right,
But
it's
I'll do
kind
my
of
homework.
okay. Like I'm not necessarily a big fan of Ian Dury, but you know, he's big and he's a proper artist and he's he's got that kind of it's very spoken word. This particular song, anyway, because I don't know much of his other music. Sex and Drugs and Rock and Roll. It's kind of spoken word over a bit of a funky track, and it's around the same time period, like late 70s, early 80s kind of thing.
Yeah,
But that is actually something of a classic. I mean, it is a classic. People, you know, it's a big song. This is really the terrible version of that, with a dude who sounds, even if he isn't, like an alcoholic, just saying really weird, sleazy things over a very, as you say, cheap, tacky, sleazy, awful, vaguely funky backing track.
the lyrics. I mean, again, the lyrics need to be seen to be believed. They're not. I don't think there's anything redeeming about them, really. Here we go. Dance, come on, let's see. Dance, ladies, that's it. Oh, I like it. I like the movements. It's nice. Which sort of sets the scene for pretty much the whole song. But I like this song. It's just so terrible, but hilariously so.
Yes, yeah, yeah. So I think one, so we've always said that we're looking for the room of music, but also another good kind of metric for it is if you had like a house party and you wanted to just play some really bad music, would you play this? And the answer for this is absolutely hell yes, you would.
100%.
Because it's got everything.
So out of all three of these, this would be the one I play.
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. Because it's a bit funky, so you can actually play it at like a house party. It's very much a meme. It's kind of memed itself into existence. It has that meme quality where it just works on that level,
Yeah.
and it's genuinely just entertaining. It genuinely I can't imagine not finding this entertaining, and the lyrics, you know, are appropriate for any house party. Do the office fling and all that sort of thing, you know, makes you feel good, doesn't it? I feel rather stranded at present. Yes, it's an amazing thought. And he has like a very like received pronunciation kind of posh accent. And
Yeah.
he just slurs his way through the words.
So there's a lot of questions about whether that was deliberate for the track or not. I don't know. But it's just
It feels purposely kind of conversational. I feel like it was purposeful, but I could be wrong.
yeah. But I don't know how much self-awareness there was around making this track either. I suspect
Yeah,
not a lot.
it's strange. That's kind of a big question mark for me. Luckily, this is one of those few tracks where it doesn't really matter either way for me because
It's entertaining either way.
yes, it is. And And yeah, it's hard to work out how much self-awareness there was around it, because one would hope he was fully self-aware. As you know, at the time, from what I know, he was at least late 50s, so he was a kind of middle-aged ITV, was it? ITN at the time, maybe? News presenter who was in some way part of respectable society. So you'd think he was self-aware enough in releasing this, but I genuinely don't know. And it's a real shame that we may never know.
Yes, I don't know if he's done any other records. I don't recall coming across any, but I'll have to take a look. But even if not, it certainly deserves more fame than it's received.
It does.
It's very much a house party. Oh, hey guys, here's a terrible song, isn't it entertaining?
Yes,
this would definitely be on that particular playlist.
Yeah. Because it's the surrealness of, is that the word? Surrealness? Surreality? I don't know.
Surrealness. It is surreal.
Yeah, it is just, it's like a fever dream. It is like a fever dream. You can't quite believe
fever dreams were presented on ITV.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's just so brilliantly weird. It does feel like the backing track was just recorded completely separately, almost for like a different project, and they just thought, should we just get this bloke on to just...
Oh, that'll do.
Should we just get this bloke on and just say these things?
But the thing is, the backing track suits the lyrics perfectly, because
it does.
They're both sleazy. So it's the combination which just adds... It's greater than the sum of its parts.
Yes, yeah. Which is always a sign of a good, bad song.
Yeah.
So, do you think, was that your favourite out of these three?
I think so. I enjoyed it the most.
Mm-hmm.
I am inclined so sold by Corey Feldman's offering. I think it was more the video than necessarily the song.
Yes, I think now that we've kind of gone through it and we've talked about it, I think I will agree. I am inclined to agree with you that this Reginald, what was his name again?
Bosanquet,
which is a great name. Great name. I think I agree that is... It's almost... I almost feel like we should do a final episode at some point to get all the best of the worst from each episode and have that kind of final showdown. Because if we did from this episode, it would be... I do think it would be this song, and I do think... Yes, I do think it edges out the other two. The Gaza song is pretty awful, but unfortunately, it doesn't have that star quality. It doesn't have that je ne sais quoi that this has.
Yeah, it's not as... It's bad, but it's not as fun. Bad.
Yes. Yeah.
So it falls down in the Room category in that regard.
Mm-hmm. It does. But it comes close. But I think you're right. I think it does fall flat.
Yeah, this one, it's definitely worth a listen all the way through.
Yes, and it is. So I do have to say though, it is a shame that this one doesn't have a music video, because the other two do, and that contributes something worthwhile. Whereas this one, there's no music video, which is a shame.
I suspect if there were to be a music video, it would just be the ITV newsroom and him reading it off.
But I think that would be brilliant. I would love that. I think that would actually work. I don't know why that would be enough for me. It would be. I think it would just be enough to see this guy in action, to see, who is he? What is he actually like? Yeah, it's a shame we lack that.
That's a fair point.
Anyway, I think that's a good summing up of this episode. We do have an episode coming up at some point, which almost feels like it will verge upon the sacrilegious.
But it's worth it.
Any listener of this podcast will know that I genuinely really like the Beatles. But I also think that every artist, every musician, no matter how brilliant they are, has released some utter crap. And the Beatles themselves, I think there's a few songs in there which are a bit crap, but that's nothing compared to their solo ventures. And there is some prime, some beautiful seams of garbage within there, I think. And I think that's what we're going to cover in our next episode. And I think it's going to be fun, because there's some underrated gems in there as well, I think.
Yeah, and some things which should, in an ideal world, would have been lost to history.
Yeah, I think the Beatles themselves would probably agree with that, like looking back. But yeah, so that's something to look forward to. But I think that's us for this episode. Yeah, little teaser. Cool, but I think that's us for this episode.
Yep, I think we've found a few gems here.
Indeed we have. Okay, cool. Thank you very much for your time then.
Thank you.